So glad you're with us for the Friday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Hope you enjoyed Thursday's special on our most favorite, least favorite, and craziest election nights that we can remember. Jim and I certainly enjoyed geeking out over those different election cycles, and I hope you enjoyed it too, and I'm sure you've got your own memories, which we encourage you to share as well. Jim and I are both technically away today, or officially away, and so our special today is one that we did a few months ago, stories that kind of slipped through the cracks. Easily could have been martinis, but other stories just kind of push them off the page. So we've got some good, we've got some crazy. I've actually got two good ones, Jim. I don't know if you've got one of each, but it's just amazing. Some of these stories that only happened a couple of weeks ago, and it feels like they happened about 6 months ago. It's just the way the news cycle goes.
I probably would characterize these as bad, and potentially bad. We'll see.
Boy, it's a weird day when I'm the optimist, but we'll see how this unfolds as we go along. But let's talk about our first great sponsor for the day first, and that is Dose. Your liver does more than 500 functions every single day, which means it's more productive probably than the rest of you. And me, filtering unwanted elements, supporting digestion, helping with energy, but we never think about it until something's wrong. But what if we actually supported our liver before problems started? That's where Dose for your liver comes in. Dose is a clinically backed liver health supplement. It's a liquid supplement taken in a daily 2-ounce shot and tastes like fresh squeezed orange juice. Dose cleanses your liver of unwanted stressors that's slowing it down with no sugar, no junk, and no calories.
Now, I understand if you feel like there's mixed messaging on a podcast called Three Martini Lunch, warning you about your liver and saying that you can help it by taking shots. But that's what happens when you take Dose daily. Because if you take Dose daily every day, you're going to reduce your sluggishness, get rid of those midday crashes, support your metabolism, and it can even aid your daily digestion. It's got real results with 2 double-blind, placebo-controlled studies showing its positive impact on liver enzyme levels.
So if you're ready to give your liver the support it deserves, head to dosedaily.co/3ml or enter 3ml to get 35% off your first subscription. Your body does so much for you. Let's do something for it. That's dosedaily.co/3ml for 35% off your first month subscription. All right, Jim, I'm excited for this juxtaposition of pessimism and mostly optimism with a little bit of frivolity at the end here. But what's your first story that you fell through the cracks here?
Okay, so it's not like they don't cover inflation, but there's an aspect of inflation rate that doesn't get nearly enough attention. The Wall Street Journal editorial board did notice this, but I've seen very little discussion of this anywhere else. So I went back and checked. Every month since June 2024, the U.S. inflation rate on a year-to-year comparison was between 2.3% and 3%. With most months, it's pretty close to 3%. In September, it was 3%. So, that's obviously better than it was when it was 9% in the middle of the Biden years in June 2022. But 3%, the Wall Street Journal editorial board argues, is not really what we should consider to be good. The Trump administration keeps saying, this is they basically are saying mission accomplished, to think back to Bush and the aircraft carrier. They put out statements every month taking a victory lap. And here's the thing. Let's say we were at that 2% goal, which is what the U.S. Federal Reserve had been saying is the aim for what we want the inflation rate to be. So you got $1 today. 10 years from now, the year 2035, you and I guess will be, not quite retired, but close to that. It would be worth 82 cents. Right? That's the level of inflation that we've gotten used to in the decades before the Biden era. If it's 3%, the value of $1 10 years from now would be 73 cents. So it does make a difference. And it's one of those things where, given a choice between around 3% and around 2%, we definitely would like to have it closer to 2%. So inflation, look, is it better than it was? Yes, that's a very low bar to clear when you say better than the worst of the Biden years. It is not, but the thing is, inflation is not really beaten. It is just partially mitigated. If you want to say significantly mitigated, fine. But it's not where you want it to be. And if you don't get it down to that 2% range, you're going to start feeling it. Now, whether or not you, the listener, choose to count tariffs as inflation, technically, tariffs are not increasing the money supply, so you can dispute whether it really counts as devaluing the dollar. It does raise the cost of imported goods. You may have noticed, yes, gas prices are down pretty, at a decent rate lately. However, coffee is also reaching an all-time high, and there are 2 fuels that keep America going. One is gas, the other is coffee, at least certainly for me and a whole bunch of Americans, right? So there's this perception that even if tariffs aren't actually affecting the inflation rate, they add to the perception the prices are going up and that inflation is bad. And America's sense the cost of living is increasing faster than their paychecks. So look, it's fall 2025. We've got about a year till the midterms. But considering how important high prices were in the fall, the really sad end to the Joe Biden presidency, if I were an incumbent Republican facing an election in a year, I would be nervous about the inflation rate, and I would really want it to be closer to 2% than to 3%. So that's my undercovered point of what probably is going to be a big factor in the year to come. 3% sounds like a good inflation rate. It really isn't.
No, 2%. For the long as I can remember, has kind of been the make or break line there. Anything less than that is generally pretty good. You never want it to go up too much, but you also don't want the economy to be in decline. Anything over 2%, you want to kind of shove it back down. And of course, the Fed usually doesn't get involved until the rates are way, way, way above that, like we've seen lately here. And so I'm going to flip it a little bit and give credit to the Trump administration here for a move they made at the UN to actually help the fight against inflation. This is from, I think, 2 Fridays ago. This is from the editorial from the Washington Examiner. President Donald Trump scored a victory for consumers on Friday by effectively blocking a United Nations carbon tax scheme for at least a year. The battle isn't over yet, as the Trump administration still needs to convince 40 other nations to abandon what would be the world's first global carbon tax. It comes from the International Maritime Association, which was created by the UN in 1948 and is the implementing international agency for several international treaties, including the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, otherwise known as MARPOL, because if you have an organization called the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, obviously the acronym is MARPOL. Must be, maybe it's from a different language. I don't know. But in 2018, the International Maritime Organization adopted its initial greenhouse gas emissions strategy, a regulatory effort that eventually became a draft net zero framework that was set to be approved by International Maritime Organization voting members on Friday. And yes, we're part of that. If adopted, the net zero framework would charge vessels of more than 5,000 gross tons between $100 and $380 for every ton of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere, depending on how badly each vessel overshot an emissions target set by the International Maritime Organization. The stated goal is to end the use of oil in shipping, reducing the net emissions of the sector to zero by 2050. Now, the Examiner points out global shipping is responsible for just 2% of all greenhouse gas emissions each year, meaning that eliminating all of its emissions would have virtually no impact on global climate or temperatures. But the impact of the first global carbon tax would be at least $10 billion a year. That is what proponents, not critics, say. UN bureaucrats would then waste the $10 billion, the Examiner says, on whatever corrupt kickbacks struck their fancy. And if shipping companies have to pay $10 billion, guess who's really going to pay that? The people who get the stuff that's on the ships. And according to the editorial, Marco Rubio, Energy Secretary Chris Wright, Sean Duffy, the Transportation Secretary, announced strict measures they would take against any country that voted to approve the net zero framework. That included visa restrictions, commercial penalties from contracts with the federal government, port fees, increased tariffs, of course. And it worked, with Singapore and Saudi Arabia leading the effort to delay a final vote on the framework for at least a year. You need 2/3 to support anything to get it to pass. So, Jim, if you leave the left to their own devices, and if you had a Biden administration UN representative, I don't think they would have fought this at all. They were all aboard the climate change agenda. And so saving businesses and saving consumers, most importantly, a lot of money from a really stupid idea, that's a pretty big win.
So, Greg, my first observation is that Marpole is my favorite PBS British detective series. Thank you for that laugh, because I'm sure that this is that one of them? I can't, is it? Yeah. Secondly, remember, Obama and all of these other people who support this want to remind you that Donald Trump is a monster because he wants to make it more expensive to trade internationally. Unlike their proposal, which will simply make the fuel for ships that take things across the sea more expensive. It's totally different when they do it. And third, how many of these people either participated or in spirit participated in the No Kings protests or rallies or celebrations? Because To me, as an American, when the UN wants to, impose a tax, on what authority? We don't recognize. The only authority above the U.S. government is God, right? You guys, I don't care if you got blue helmets. I don't care if you got a snazzy building in Foggy Bottom. I don't care if Sean Penn made a movie about you. You have no authority over the U.S. That's why we go. We also don't recognize the International Criminal Court. We've basically made clear in NATO, we're in NATO, but U.S. troops will always be commanded by U.S. commanders. We don't recognize any other government as being above ours. And so the idea of UN taxation strikes me as just like it's inherently ridiculous, inherently unenforceable and unworkable. But I suppose if you want to do it on international shipping, that's the place where the UN can say, we're not in America, we're just offshore, and therefore we can impose these taxes. So excellent selection. And yes, this was undercovered. International shipping doesn't get a huge amount of attention normally, but this is the sort of thing that probably deserved more attention. And I'm glad that we're getting to it belatedly.
Yeah, exactly. Stay in your lane, UN. I'm not even really sure what that is anymore, other than strongly worded statements you're not going to back up and are usually wrong in the first place. But
oh no, Hans Bricks. For all the aficionados of Team America World Police out there.
We've gone from Agatha Christie to Team America in just a couple of minutes here. This is the variety you get in 3 Martini Lunch. I'll tell you what else you get. You get a fantastic offer from Mizzen and Main. I am wearing one of my Mizzen and Main shirts today. I love this shirt. It could be a dress shirt. It could be casual. I'm wearing it with jeans today. It's a little bit thicker than your typical dress shirt, so I'm loving it in fall. I'll probably wear it a lot in winter as well. Feels great, especially in the normally freezing studios that we've got here to keep all the equipment in good health. But when it comes to dress clothes, let's be honest, most are not comfortable. They're high maintenance. They don't feel good to wear necessarily. You spend too much time cleaning them and too much money on them. Ironing, dry cleaners, whatever. Mizzen and Main, you don't have to deal with any of that, and you still get great clothes.
Mizzen and Main is the reason why the collar on Greg's shirt right now looks terrific, while mine looks like a hang glider left over from the 1970s. Mizzen and Main shirts look refined, but they're stretchy, lightweight, moisture-wicking, wrinkle-resistant, which just doesn't really apply to me, and completely machine washable. No ironing or dry cleaning needed. When you put their clothes on, you will feel the difference instantly. Professional style that is actually comfortable, whether you're in the office, on the road, or even out on the golf course.
Right now, Mizzen and Main offering 3 Martini Lunch listeners 20% off your first purchase at mizzenandmain.com, promo code 3ML20. That's Mizzen, spelled M-I-Z-Z-E-N, and Main, M-A-I-N.com, promo code 3ML20 for 20% off. Mizzenandmain.com, promo code 3ML20. And if you'd rather shop in person, you can find Mizzen and Main stores in select states. All right, Jim, what's next in terms of the undercovered or slip through the crack stories of the last few weeks here?
All right, this wasn't completely undercovered. This is one of those, got a little bit of attention, page A27 style story when it probably deserved to be page A1. Look, every year, we do on this podcast 3 Martini Lunch End of the Year Awards. And one of our categories is undercovered or underreported stories. Every year, strong contender could be national debt or the annual deficit. Right? They're always bad, never get enough attention. Uncomfortable issue for Democrats, but also an uncomfortable issue for Republicans a lot of years who don't really live up to their promises on fiscal conservatism. Well, not too long ago, October 22nd, the U.S. national debt hit $38 trillion. Now, that by itself is not what was uncovered. What was uncovered was that the debt hit $37 trillion on August 12th of this year. So in 71 days, less time than it took for the New York Jets to get mathematically eliminated from the playoffs, the U.S. added $1 trillion to the deficit. That is the fastest rate ever other than the pandemic. And back then we had the excuse of, the pandemic. Everybody's getting laid off. Nobody's getting, paying into taxes, massive expenditures for all the, like that. You look at that and you're like, okay, that's really bad, but you can understand why. 2025, it's not that it's been a quiet year, but there's nothing wildly out of the ordinary going on that would be dramatically increasing U.S. government expenditures or dramatically reducing U.S. tax and payment income. In fact, because of the tariffs, we're supposed to be having a whole lot more money coming in. Now, why is it so high? Well, a portion of it is interest rates are high, and when we borrow a lot, we have to pay more in interest to maintain the debt financing. I don't think you can say, look, the Republicans do not have a big majority in the House. We're talking about the problems they have in the Senate. It's not a huge majority either. And President Trump is really not a diehard fiscal conservative. I like Doge and what they did, but I think it's, we're talking, they're saving millions and tens of millions when we're talking about, adding trillions. And I just want to, one last thought. Greg, you and I have been doing this podcast for a very long time, back to the 2010 election cycle.
Yeah.
Back then, the fact that under Obama we added $1 trillion to the debt was just considered like the worst thing ever. And justifiably, Republicans, conservatives, fiscal conservatives were tearing their hair out back then because the deficit had increased $1 trillion in 1 year. And now we did it in 71 days. And not even in a COVID-level pandemic crisis. We're not in fighting Iraq or Afghanistan. Where's all the money going? So that is, I would argue, the second really big undercovered story of the last few months.
Yeah, and you have to pay off the debt, and the interest rates aren't what they used to be. They've gone down a little bit since their peak, but when you have to pay that much at those interest rates, that adds up as well. And so, yeah, both parties are to blame for this. Republicans have talked a good game. I think there's a number in the congressional delegation in all these cycles that are serious about it, and others that just aren't. They see it as a means of getting elected. And Democrats, as you saw from 1992 and Bill Clinton, we're going to reinvent government. We're going to be the New Deal, not the New Deal, but the new Democrats, the more moderate Democrats. And as soon as he got a Democratic Congress, those first 2 years, he spent like crazy, had a big tax increase, and basically broke a ton of campaign promises and paid for it in the midterms. And so that's kind of the Democratic instinct, and the Republicans don't follow through on their efforts. And now that you're up to $38 trillion, it's really hard to get the horse back in the barn. All you can really do at this point is try to slow the growth and then eventually turn the ship around, but it's not easy. So, Jim, for mine, next one, also a positive one. If you go back to last year, 2024, and when Joe Biden reluctantly, I think we can safely say, announced he was not going to remain the Democratic nominee for 2024, he did then pull a fast one on all the people who wanted him shoved out by endorsing Kamala Harris. And for the most part, every Democrat immediately got in line. A bunch of people immediately said, we're not going to run. But the person that held out the longest, I think, was Barack Obama. I think Pelosi and Schumer did as well for a few days. But Obama's plan, in addition to wanting a quick open primary somehow, he specifically wanted the ticket of Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer and Arizona Senator Mark Kelly, which you would think, even though they weren't part of the campaign that year, would kind of elevate Gretchen Whitmer into a strong candidate for 2028. But not only is she an afterthought at best in the polls, now it looks like she's not even going to bother running. She was in Canada not long ago, and after giving a speech at the Empire Club of Canada, in this interview, the 2028 campaign came up, and she says, a lot of this is what you would normally say at this point. I got a big job right now to stay focused on, and I'm going to do that. I don't want to take my eye off the ball and to go out having missed something, having lost something, or having a catastrophe happen under my watch. That's all standard boilerplate stuff. But then she says this: I don't know if I need to be the main character in the next chapter, but I want to have a hand in writing it. And I think I've got an important vantage point as the governor of an important swing state, and so I anticipate helping, but I don't know if I'm going to be the person. You usually don't try to pour cold water on yourself. You usually just kind of give I'm focused on my current job, can't possibly focus on that yet. But once you start, putting statements out there, I don't think I'm the right person for this job. It's not a no, but it's a pretty good sign that she's probably not going to do this.
Greg, those are some sharp eyes. That I had not heard that comment, and it does. Like, you are correct. You do this long enough, you've heard every version of oh, it's too early to even start thinking about that. My plate is full with all of my responsibilities here. In fact, I've got a ribbon cutting ceremony tomorrow, and a prayer breakfast. So I haven't even thought about running for president. It certainly isn't something I'm obsessed with for the last decades and decades. I'm certainly not consumed with ambition for lust for power. No, that sounds genuinely, if not unenthusiastic, than having mixed thoughts about it. And maybe, you watch these cycles. Look, almost every Democrat, including our old friend Irving Schmidlap, ran in 2020. And for almost all of them, not only, there can only be one nominee. Kamala Harris ended up as the vice president. And almost everybody else, things did not turn out well for, unless you want to count Tulsi Gabbard, who's now director of national intelligence in a completely different party, in a completely different administration. But look, most of the time you run for president, it does not go well. Most of the time you run for president with this, Stuart Smalley-esque, doggone it, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, people like me. And it turns out, well, actually, no, they don't like you so much. You go to Iowa, and they just want to get some ranch dressing and wait for you to get out of their way. And 2020 was a really vivid cycle for a whole bunch of Democrats who had managed to get glowing profiles in Vanity Fairs and the cover of getting liberal MSM reporters to write glowing profiles of you. Really not that hard. I feel like I run through a whole Beto, right? But actually getting people's votes, they can only vote for one. And it's tough. And so I almost say good for her for recognizing the difficulty and the fact that maybe this is not you can do great things in America without running for president. So look, it's early. They're definitely not ruling it out. And generally when people don't want to run for office, they say, I don't want to run for office. But those are, again, that feels like so. It feels like if there was genuine interest, those comments would have come out differently.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. And it's a good martini because Gretchen Whitmer would make a terrible president. She's been a terrible governor of Michigan, although she's won comfortably both times. She's term limited for governor, and now her lieutenant governor and secretary of state, among others, are duking it out for the nomination next year. She was one of the 5 governors in America that put COVID patients in nursing homes, along with Cuomo and Murphy and Wolf and Newsom. I mean, that's not a fraternity you want to be a part of. That's a
all-star lineup right there. Yeah,
exactly.
Murderers Row, quite literally Murderers Row.
Right. And then 2018 is when she got elected governor. Her whole thing was fix the darn roads, and maybe a few got fixed. But I've driven in Michigan a lot over the last few years. There's a lot of them that didn't get fixed, and so I think that she fell short on that. She's been caught vulgar, mocking the Eucharist with the whole Doritos stunt a while back. And so I think she would have had trouble probably winning the nomination. But, again, the door's not completely shut, but it's close.
Greg, she hung out in the Oval Office with Trump, even though she didn't want people to see.
That's probably what would have killed the candidacy right there. You were in the same room as Donald Trump, and you weren't screaming at him. She was hiding her face behind a binder, but other than that.
Even Janet Mills could do that.
That's right. All right. Let's talk about Quo. Running a business on a clunky old phone system these days, kind of like competing with one hand tied behind your back when it comes to business. And every time you miss a call, that's literally money left on the table. And Quo, which is formerly Open Phone, is the modern alternative. It's built to help you work smarter, build stronger relationships, and really never miss an opportunity, because that's what your business and your customers deserve.
Quo is the #1 business phone system, which is built for the business environment of 2025, not 1995. And it's rated the top choice for customer satisfaction with more than 3,000 reviews on G2. Forget juggling phones or using a landline. Quo works right from an app on your phone or your computer. Your whole team can share one number and collaborate on calls or texts like a shared inbox, so you have faster responses and happier customers.
Quo is now offering 3 Martini Lunch listeners 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/3ml. That's QUO.com/3ml. You can even keep your existing number for free. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right, a little bit of a walk on the lighter side here, I think, for both of us in the final martini here. Jim, what do you have?
So I came across this on a YouTube video a few nights ago, and I've been thinking about it. Greg, if I said to you that a decade or two, at some point in the future, not super far in the future, the NFL may not be the most popular sport in America anymore, would you find that likely or unlikely?
Pretty unlikely in the next few years anyway.
So, because you're looking at that and you're like, it's top of the world, even if you're a first, and by the way, we joke about the Bears, we joke about the Jets, but you and I have been fans our whole lives, and and you have this idea of no, it's on top of the world. Everybody watches this. The Super Bowl is like the last great, everybody in America is watching the same thing kind of event. You'd think this thing's going to stay on top. It's an interesting argument. So just in the last couple of years, the NFL has started doing its games on streaming platforms. The Thursday Night Football is on Amazon Prime. And by the way, what I'm about to say is not a knock on Ryan Fitzpatrick. I have happy memories of the 2016 season. They're doing fine. But somebody made this interesting point that right now, and also they're going to have a game on Netflix this year. Right? It's not going to be on regular broadcast TV. If you want to watch the game between, I believe, the two marquee games that will showcase NFC division rivals face off: Dallas Cowboys versus Washington Commanders, Detroit Lions versus Minnesota Vikings. Right, stream live on Netflix. All right, this is on Christmas Day, 2025. Well, Netflix, it's popular, but according to a survey, 72% of U.S. adults have used Netflix. Right. Another one said that 83% of U.S. households have subscription video on demand. That's pretty darn high. But the thing about broadcast TV is that if you have a TV, you can get that channel, right? And thankfully, most of the NFL games are on broadcast television or basic cable. Here in the Washington area, and my understanding of most NFL games, if let's say the game is in Washington, it's the game Monday Night Football is on ESPN, but the game will also be simulcast on the local ABC affiliate. Disney owns both ABC and ESPN. You see a lot of cross-pollination between ESPN and ABC Sports. So if you can watch your team. And this guy's argument was, certain people have their NFL fandom genetically inherited, like I did, and I passed it along to my kids. But sometimes you just, get into it. And the interesting thing is that sometimes people don't become fans of their hometown team. They like something because they really like it. Rich Lowry is a Tennessee Titans fan. And I said, he grew up in Virginia. How did that? He's like, well, when he was growing up, Earl Campbell of the Houston Oilers was just running over the entire rest of the league, so he became a Houston Oilers fan. So the thing is that NFL right now, you got the Thursday night game, which is as we mentioned is on Amazon. You've got the 1 o'clock game on Sunday. You've got the 4 o'clock game on Sunday. You usually have two networks. Usually you've got Fox doing NFC games, AFC games on CBS. Sometimes they switch and all that stuff. You've also got Sunday Night Football on NBC, and then you've got Monday Night Football on ESPN. So that's like 5 games that theoretically you could watch. You're going to have the best teams usually featured in those games, but the NFL tries to pick teams and good matchups for that. So let's say you live in the New York area, but for some reason the Los Angeles Rams have really caught your attention. There's a good chance, even if you don't have the streaming services, even if you don't have NFL Sunday Ticket, you'll get a decent number of chances to watch that. NFL contracts will expire in a couple of years. The expectation is that Prime obviously will put a ton of money on the table. Netflix wants to get into this on a more regular basis. So eventually, the NFL will start to have its games behind a paywall. And the argument is that, look, every year, this is actually the really breaking news in this one, every year Americans die. Generally, these Americans are old. And generally, these Americans have been, a good chunk of these are football fans. So they're passing away. So if you're a sports organization, you need new fans to keep being attracted each time. If you put your games behind a paywall, all of a sudden the number of people who can be exposed to it gets restricted unless they're already subscribers to that pay service. So the argument is that this is actually a very dangerous move for the NFL to make. It's a very bad idea to put your stuff behind paywalls because you need people to casually get into it. Now, if you have Stranger Things, right? If you have something where people are going to seek it out, people talked about it, it's been popular for a while, that's fine. But the idea is, the argument is that the NFL is cutting off the idea for people who are casual fans or not that into it to get into it by watching the games because the game is designed for television. I don't know if I totally buy into this, but I do think it's kind of interesting that this switch over. And look, when you and I were growing up, baseball was a huge deal. Mm-hmm. Right? World Series of Dodgers and Blue Jays, it's a much smaller deal. Like last year, it was Yankees and Dodgers, and the game was on one night for Halloween party last year, and 5 people were watching out of dozens and dozens of people. Baseball is just not what it used to be. The NBA's picked that up some. NASCAR's a bigger deal than it used to be. I hear more Americans are getting into Formula One, hockey, and all that. But this one of those things where not every sport is guaranteed to keep their audiences. And there's a real danger, I think, for football if they end up becoming the sort of thing where you need to have a bunch of subscriptions. You're going to eventually, over time, lose your audience.
Yeah, that's a lot to think about. But I'd be curious to see what the young adult viewership rate is right now, regardless of how they consume it. I have to think older people spend more time watching games than the younger people, but we'll see about that. The more it goes behind the paywall, the less interested I am. I'm not going to fork over any money for Peacock. I'm not going to watch on Netflix. You know, conservatives are already kind of in revolt against Netflix because of too many shows that leaves people squeamish about it looking like child exploitation. And so that's not going to be a huge draw. But as time goes on, Amazon, the way things are done is changing rapidly. So it wouldn't surprise me that it happens, but I think you're going to diminish the market. They'll probably charge enough for it so that it won't matter, because once you're paying for it, you don't need as big of an audience, but it could be a definite drop in total numbers.
The argument is this is eating your seed corn. This is, you're getting profits up front by getting big TV deals with these streaming services, but you're actually cutting off people's ability to watch the casual fans that would come in and grow into adult fans.
Well, that could be a major controversy for professional football, Jim. There's no shortage of controversies in sports altogether. We've certainly seen football players suspended for gambling. Had a big scandal just blow up with the FBI making arrests with the NBA. So you're thinking, is there any sport or activity where honor is still at the center of the competition? And unfortunately, the answer seems to be no. I've held on to this one since middle of September. This is from the New York Post. World Stone Skimming Championship tossed into chaos by cheating scandal. This is a very well-written article. No stone was left unturned at this global championship, rocked by a cheating scandal. At least several competitors were tossed like the stones they threw at the World Stone Skimming Championship on the small Scottish island of Easdale earlier this month. A handful of 400 participants were accused of using suspiciously circular-shaped stones that helped them more easily bounce along the water instead of following rules that require them to use natural stones found on the island. Kyle Matthews, who organized the event, told the BBC that the stone-cold cheaters held their hands up and issued apologies for doctoring stones when confronted. Jim, if we can't trust stone skimmers to follow the rules and participate with integrity, is there any competition where we can expect fidelity to fair competition?
Greg,
just devastating.
You know which celebrity I think is right all behind this nefarious plot?
Who's that?
The Rock. So you started out with this, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. I can't believe. But like halfway, the suspiciously circular shaped stones. I was like, yes. Okay, I want to see those stones. I want to see what counts as a suspiciously circular stone versus a naturally stone. And I actually, when clicking through the Ocho, which by the way, good for you for ESPN for just adopting that line from Dodgeball and saying, okay, we're going to turn ESPN News into ridiculous sports during odd hours. I've seen the stone skipping championships, or I've seen the competitions, and I kind of get into it. I'm working out, I'm on the treadmill, or I'm on the elliptical, and like, okay, that was a really good throw. Good job, man.
Yeah, you get into it. They got the slippery stairs, they got the pillow fighting, but apparently you have to only use rocks wherever the competition is being held. This would seem to me like a pretty big scandal in the sport. So first of all, I was just shocked that there is such a thing as the World Stone Skipping Championships, and everybody traveled from around the world to Scotland to participate in this. But to have it denigrated like this, Jim, what's the world coming to? Anyway, it is time for us to wrap up. Jim, have a great weekend. I'll see you on Monday.
See you Monday, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast if you don't already. Tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific Friday. Have a terrific weekend. And join us again on Monday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.